This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Leader Podcast by Pattern Talent, where we interview great leaders and we seek to understand leadership. I'm Brad McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Jessup, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode. We are back, another episode. We have brought back a fan favorite. They love him here in Phoenix. They know him all around the world. He is the one, the only Mr. Shane Kuyper. Yay! Shane, super excited to have you back. Brad, any exciting words of wisdom for Shane before we dig in today?
Shane, we're pumped to have you, man. I know this was a short notice interview, so thanks for being willing to jump in and do it. But we heard a little bit about what you're up to, and we heard a little bit about some of the things that you've been learning and teaching and training your clients with, and we thought that our listeners would love it. So that's what brings us here with you this afternoon. And the listeners don't care what time it is, do they?
I mean, they can listen whenever they want. That's a nice part of the podcast.
Yeah, that's great. But
yeah,
welcome to the show, man. We're glad to have you back for a third time.
Awesome. Pumped. Yeah. These are some of my favorite conversations are the ones that we get to have together. So looking forward to another one.
Likewise.
I love it too. It's especially like the fact that you need to probably throw your computer away because it didn't work. Because I'm guessing you're running a PC and not a Mac.
Yeah.
And also, this guy sends me an article the other day claiming that, Walmart/Sam's Club has better food than Costco or better ice cream. Which, how do you even come to that conclusion?
It's half the price.
First of all,
it's $1 at Sam's Club. It's $1.99 at Costco.
Yeah, but also, did you question how it got there in the first place?
No.
Like maybe they're hiring children and that's where they make their ice cream. That's how they get it so cheap. Maybe it's not okay.
Isn't it interesting though, where it's like, it really is the same store? Like, have you been in both? You guys have probably never been inside a Sam's Club.
Yeah.
Well, that isn't, I mean, I have.
Well,
it's probably been a decade and a half.
Yeah.
It's very presumptuous for you to suggest that, but
Yeah,
I have been.
very elitist.
I'm pretty sure they're being run by the same person somewhere in the Middle East.
Probably. Yeah. They're just sitting on a crap ton of cash. They also run the Live Golf Tour and have no problem making money there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It is a conspiracy one way or the other. So I always had to bring it up because, Brad and I would be Apple guys and you less so, an Apple person.
Yeah.
But I will convert you. I will.
Taylor, remind us of who Shane is in general and what he's up to.
Love it.
From a
Shane
work standpoint.
Yeah, Shane is the owner, 2 different businesses, the Healthy Competitor and Identity Hoops International. So Shane travels around coaching teams and businesses and has taught myself and so many others so much. He came in for our company and put us through one of his workshops, and it was fantastic. Shane, am I leaving anything out there that you would typically include for yourself? What am I leaving out?
No, those are great. Yeah, those are great. I love to compete, and I think like when I'm in competition, I'm at a lot of times I'm at my best. And I spent a long part of my life competing from a place of unhealth, and so basketball is a big part of my story. So I primarily work with college basketball coaches, but starting to work with more and more high school basketball coaches, and super into competing and super into figuring out together and learning from a growth mindset how we could compete from a place of health and how we can have healthy teams and have our success come from being healthy instead of just being driven and being maniacal and work harder than somebody else.
Shane, even just hearing you talk about what you do that way, it leads to a question that I have. And Taylor told me I was allowed to ask any question I want during the intro.
I did not. I did not say
you
that.
did. You said
No.
ask any question. You said if you have a question, just ask it. because I came up with a plan for this podcast, which Taylor destroyed. He just ripped it up and threw it away. And so here we go. We're going off script. Can you be I'm going to use the word elite, knowing that it's somewhat subjective. Can you be an elite performer and not be totally unhinged maniacal?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this would be super interesting, but Nike had a ad in the Olympics. The Olympics just ended, and I must have seen it, 15 to 20 times just watching with my kids. And it's all about like, am I a bad person? So it's going through all these elite athletes, D1 athletes, Kobe, LeBron, Noah Lyles, and wrestlers, and all these Olympians, and asking all these questions of like, am I a bad person? And what it's really, the underlying truth of what it's trying to communicate is that you have to be a little bit, or actually a lot of bit, crazy to compete at an elite level or perform at an elite level. And I think they got it all wrong, because the elite performers that I know actually have like a deep respect for each other, and they know that they need each other to compete at a high level. So they don't see it as like, I'm better than you, or what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine. There's a deep respect for the sport, for the game, for the business, and you like. There's not like, there's not a formula to be an elite performer. Like, we have to understand our values. We've talked about that. We have to do it our own way, and we have to do it in the way that makes the most sense for me. So you can't just say like, if I want my kids to be an elite performer, that this is how it's going to happen. Like, no, there's lots of ways that it can happen. And I do believe in deep in my soul that you can be a healthy person and be empathetic and caring, and that does not have to have an effect on the work ethic or how much I want it. Actually, I think in today's age we have so many resources that it's like, no, you might even be able to compete at a higher level if you do it in community and from a place of health.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. That's Brad. I give you a B-. So it was actually a pretty good question. I was surprised. So Shane, A+
B-.
answer. Yeah. I know. I love that. And Shane and I actually had this, we were chatting on the phone a little bit ago, and we were talking about that. There are a lot of unhealthy competitors that are very successful.
Yeah.
Right. And in that path, I mean, the question would be, why try and be healthy as you compete? Because there's two different ways. I can compete from a place of unhealth, right? And I can still get to the end result, or I can compete from a place of health in the business world and in the sports world. So give me your quick take, and we're going to get into what you're doing with a lot of this stuff, why competing in a healthy way is so important, but kind of what's the difference, and why is it important to do it this way, where you compete in a healthy way?
So there's like, it's holistic, the way that I like to think about it. Like, I want to be well for my life. And competition is actually one of the things that allows me to be healthy and to be the real Shane. But if I'm like over the top obsessive, if my identity is wrapped up in the results of the numbers or the scoreboard or clientele or whatever you're competing in, then it's not sustainable. Like, if who I am is what I can produce, then then you're so results oriented, and you're not really living into the process of and the consistency of what makes competition so great in our lives. So I have many stories of like athletes who have made it. But recently, David Letterman interviewed Charles Barkley. I'm a big Charles Barkley fan, just in life in general. I think he's fantastic, and could listen to him all day.
Can I interject there? Why do you love Chuck so much?
It's just so authentic. He's one of the most real dudes, and he's not scared. He's just him, and he says things that are so untrue, and he also says things that are very true, and he laughs at himself, and he cares about relationships and people, and he said many times how many times he's screwed up in life, and grew up without a dad, and early in his career he was like, the chip on his shoulder, I guess, was because his dad didn't show up, and so that made him compete at a really high level, which it can. But what he explained in this interview with Letterman was fascinating to me. It was like that when you're living on the edge like that, like when you're towing the line of what's okay and what's not okay, like what's healthy and then what's like one little thing can cause you to act like a maniac. And so he was challenged by a friend to forgive his dad when he was in the NBA, and he actually did that, and it like calmed his whole presence down, and it did not have an effect on how hard he played. And he even said, I think in the interview, like he started to become more of a complete player and a complete person. So that's like the most recent example I have is like, yeah, I don't know these men, but there are lots of indicators that like Michael Jordan hasn't lived like an amazing, like fun, joyful life after basketball. But the athletes who have kind of done this process of learning who they are and who they want to be next, and their identity is not wrapped up in results, it seems like they've been able to like just live a joyful life. And Chuck seems like one of those guys to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. That's really well said, right? I think if we compete and if we live for something that becomes our identity, it is all we are left with at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So whatever we choose to have be our identity, that's what we're left with. Michael chose basketball at all costs, right? And if you watched, I can't even think of the name of the documentary right now. You can see it. Relationships are burned, right? And like you look at him, and he's probably never going to watch this, but you would look at him and you go, man, he looks sad.
Yeah.
Like he looks kind of defeated and depressed. Whereas you look at Chuck, you look at, Shaquille O'Neal, you look at Kobe before he passed away and what he was able to give back. And Kobe was an elite level performer, right? Perfectionist to a T, but he just seems so much more holistic at the end of it. Like as important as basketball was to him, he was able to hang it up, move forward, and do other things well. It didn't seem like it defined him. Whereas other people that, and this, I think the same is true in business, right? We probably know some people out there that have given up relationships, have given up, friendships, have given up even other business opportunities to go because their identity is so fixed in whatever it is that they're doing, rather than it being external from them. So in that vein, Shane, you are launching something really cool to help people compete at a high level, because you work with high level performers, business owners, coaches, anybody that is a high performer. And so we really want to bring you on because we're excited about what you're doing, and we wanted you to be able to tell the listeners, because I think that they need to know. So talk to us about what you are getting ready to launch here.
Yeah, so thanks. It's called the Healthy Competitor Membership Experience. So it's an interactive course style, but very community based. And I've been developing curriculum for it without even knowing for like the better part of 10 years. And so I've worked with so many college basketball coaches, and in the last 2 years worked with quite a few like business owners and leaders. And so all this material number one, it's been a game changer for me in my life, in my marriage, as a dad, and my relationships. And so all of these things that I've learned, I've kind of had ongoing dialogue with basketball coaches and business leaders. And then my wife was actually the one who was like, hey, I think this is a membership. And so following her lead, we're like 11 days away from launching it. And there's going to be a bunch of basketball coaches in it. But it's actually open to any type of leader or anyone who wants to step into health in their own life with these leadership principles. So that's a 30,000 foot overview of how it started and kind of what it is.
Yeah. Love it, man. So if I sign up, if I'm like, cool, Shane, hey, I'm going to sign up. What does that kind of look like? Like what do we go through? Do you have a curriculum that you walk people through? You know, I know there's a community in there. What does it look like kind of on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So this has all been designed with like the college basketball coaches' daily grind in mind. And so since it's like just starting, it's super affordable on like the founder's ground level. And it's all being designed to you should be able to spend an average of 30 minutes a week and go through all of the content, watch like whether it be a private podcast or a little video or a little interview or just an article or something that I write. And then there will be forums and sub communities that you can there's going to be some really cool networking inside the membership too. And I think people will find like future co-workers or people that they're going to hire inside of this membership as well through growing together and learning together.
Yeah, it's awesome. Shane, the other day when you were telling me about this, you mentioned a really interesting concept that I thought the listeners would be curious to learn about. You've been applying it primarily in a sports environment, but as I was listening to you talk about it, I was like, man, this is marriage, family, marriage and children. It's extended family. I think family businesses could really benefit from this. It's teams, organizations, whether that's sports and in the for-profit, nonprofit space. So tell us and tell our listeners more about the neurosequential model and what that looks like. Give us kind of the quick definition of that.
Yeah.
And then Taylor has a little surprise for you.
We have two close friends, my wife and I, who are therapists, and they got did a webinar or like a what do you call it, like a little workshop, half-day workshop from Dr. Bruce Perry and his team about neurosequential model. And so what he learned is that like all these trauma-informed spaces, like the model wasn't working and it wasn't describing what kids and young adults are actually experiencing in a way that made sense to him. And so he kind of mapped the brain into 4 parts, an upside down triangle, and kind of explains how the brain sequences information and all the filters that the brain puts information and fears and anxieties in order for us to process it with what we would like consider the smart parts of our brain. But the amount of things that get processed and shoved back down in the bottom 2 parts of the brain, which is where like our reflexive and reactive and all the fear and anxiety is a pretty large percentage. So for me, it's put pictures into, and like I've been able to kind of understand how I'm organized, how I'm like neurosequentially organized, and why I react and why I give my fears so much credit, and then how I can actually have some visual tools to access the 3rd and 4th parts of my brain, which are where I can access values and emotional regulation and like solid leadership principles.
That was a great answer, man. I every time you've talked about it, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of a little tiny bit of understanding of which you have a much bigger picture of which other people have a much bigger picture of which there's this other giant, just how the brain actually functions. So
Yeah. What you just said was fascinating to me. And don't you think like actually answer this question like in however you would want to, both like don't like as in your world, like as a leader, or if you guys have ever had bosses, like don't you think that you should understand like how the brain is structured and organized if you want to lead yourself and lead other people?
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Totally.
simple.
I mean,
Okay,
no,
figure out a
Shane, I
different
think
way
it's
to
a
answer that
terrible
question.
idea. I think we
Dude,
shouldn't know.
because
Yeah.
no, listen, when I remember walking out of the hospital in Scottsdale with JJ and being like, kind of like, wait a second, like, is this it? Like, are they going to say anything to us before we leave? Is there like any kind of like, are they going to teach us CPR right here? Like, what's happening? And it was just like, all right, yeah, like, you guys are good.
Yeah.
And walking out of the hospital is this surreal moment for me of being like, no, we're not good. Like, I have no idea what to do.
Wow.
I have no idea what to do. And what I should have gotten is like an 8-hour training on like the acute stress response.
Yeah.
Because as often as like I see an infant going through some version of the acute stress response, right? Because everything's new and they're crying and they're hungry and they have no idea. They have no language for their experience. They have nothing other than their environment and whatever senses they're experiencing, right? But like as an early father, and I know you guys can relate to this, Shane, you've done this many times. You're pretty second nature to you now. But Taylor is, new twins, 5 months old. And it is very stressful to be a new parent, right? And then you add in more kids and you're like, whoa, not only is it stressful to be a new parent, it's stressful to be a parent of children at any age, let alone, starting a company, running a business. You've got your spouse that you're also trying to care for and connect with. You've got all these other life demands. And in my experience, we go through that acute stress response multiple times a day, depending on what our life is like, what our relationship with our spouse is like, kids, work, etc. What our commute is like. I get in fight zone at least one time every single commute. Like that is definitely happening every
It's
time.
also because you take the carpool lane when you're the only person in the car.
Don't say that on the internet, Taylor.
I just want the internet to know that Brad just chooses.
You can get arrested in the UK for things you say on social media. Do you know that?
I mean, you could probably get arrested here for some things you say on social media too.
Yeah, but it's kind of like very severe here.
So
just Google that later. It's fascinating. Anyway, okay, so Taylor, I think we need a neurosequential surprise for Shane.
So wouldn't it be cool, Brad? Wouldn't it be cool because they tell you not to like shake a baby, and then they teach you how to like buckle the new car seat in, and then but like I do think it would be cool if like in some process of becoming a dad or multiplying your family, if people would take it on themselves to understand like how the brain is sequenced and like how our neurocircuits work and like what trauma has done and all these things. It actually has been a game changer for me, and hopefully I haven't screwed my kids up too bad. But now I'm a good dad now that I've gone through this training.
Yeah, it took me a few years. Well, let's stay here for a minute, Brad. Speaking of going off script, because I mean, one of your questions was kind of, talking about stress, right? What is stress? And man, this is actually a really fascinating idea, Shane. The idea is, hey, we've got a bunch of people that are leading families, they're leading businesses, they're leading organizations, they're leading teams, and they don't necessarily know how the brain actually functions in order to do that. Is that right? I mean, like, I don't know necessarily. I mean, I know a little bit. Fight or flight, I think, was the old terminology, and that was about as far as I went. Um, and I find it fascinating because for the majority of humankind being around, we haven't known and we've survived anyways. But I also have my own opinions on why I think it's more important now than ever to actually have this understanding. So, talk to me about the neurosequential model and a little bit more about what you're learning and why you think it'd be so important for Brad's scenario. You're leaving the hospital, and rather than just saying, "Hey, don't shake your baby," right? And here's how you buckle the car seat in. You say, "Hey, can I unpack the brain and what's about to happen for you?"
Yeah.
Like, why? What would that conversation look like?
Yeah, well, and it might have to be like your own, where I'm not sure it's the nurse's job to teach me how my brain works. But
Sure.
I mean, maybe there is some training, like some virtual trainings to be done. So I like the track that I've done that I'm trained in is it's neurosequential model in sport, and there's different tracks, but they even say in the trainings that it's mostly the same content, and it applies to education, business. There's even a track for like memory care facilities for like elderly people, um, and therapy too. There's a track for therapists. Um, so my learning of it has been like through a sports psychologist filter, and learning like what peak performance and how we can get there, through accessing the smart parts of our brain, um, and how the bottom parts of the brain can actually be used as a calming, like the repetition, the practicing, like the just getting the reps in can get me into a state of flow where I can access like the cortex part of my brain, which is like where um, good decisions are made. But like most bad decisions are made in the bottom two parts of the brain, and that's where like fear and anxiety, like all the neuro, like all these things are firing all the time, which is fight, flight, freeze, and avoid pain at all costs. And we've experienced that before, and I'm not going to let this information go to the top two parts of the brain because it's too painful. And the brain is always, this is another fascinating thing that I've learned. Like the brain is always trying to feel better. So even when you feel good and like you're experiencing joy, the brain is trying to feel better. And then when you're in pain and or like some like the brain is trying to cope, it's still trying to feel better. So understanding that has been really, really neat for me in raising kids, especially. And for basketball coaches that I've started talking about, like, oh, like you can just see the light bulbs go off. So,
Yeah. So, so to understand it correctly, so when I'm facing a choice or a decision, um, and that decision comes in, it's processed in the bottom part of my brain first. Is that right? Is that how this works? Which is the bottom part of my brain is the more animalistic, fear center, fear driven, but I need to get to the part of my brain that I can process it with reason and logic and make a sound decision. Is that correct?
yeah, well said. So, like the bottom is like they call it the brain stem. It's like all primal, all things that animals can do. And like when you touch a hot frying pan, that's like what we're thankful for the bottom parts of our brain because it's what is reflexive and reactive. And so we need that. We need that. And in sports, we need that part of our brain. In business, we need that part of our brain. When we're driving, it has its place. Um, and then we go to up, which is like the diencephalon, which is like that's where the filters happen. So then it's like, okay, are we actually going to allow this to go to the limbic? The limbic would be the third part, or are we just going to keep it down here? And so the amount of stuff, that's what I've learned, is the amount of stuff that happens in the bottom two parts of my brain is fascinating to me. And all the trauma ages in the formative years of my life, like 0 to 6, like it's fascinating. Like stuff was broken, like things things are scared. My brain are still scared of that happens 0 to 6. But the more mature I get and the more I get to step into health, like these things are actually like can actually rewire, and then these filters get safer. And then the limbic system is the third part of the brain. And that's where like all the emotions live. So feelings and emotions, which is also hugely important, because the more that we can access our feelings and emotions, then it's like, and we can talk to them a little bit and say, oh, like, I know why you're here. Like, yeah, like, thank you for showing up. Like I've done the work, and I was expecting for you to show up sadness. Have you guys seen Inside Out 2 yet?
I haven't.
Okay.
I need to go. My wife doesn't want to go. She said she thinks it'll be too sad.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll take you. Take you, Taylor.
Dude, no,
we're going on a date.
Yeah. Maybe the three of us can go together. Guys' night. We'll go see a G-rated movie. We'll go see an anime. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
There's some amazing like things that come to life in this movie that are describing what I'm talking about, like beautifully, like unbelievably beautifully. And then when I can access the fourth part of my brain, which is the cortex, which is really where like that's the real Shane, right? Like that's when I'm curious, that's when I'm leading other people to learn, and I have this growth mindset, this like perspective that is so much bigger than just my perception. So yeah, what do you guys think so far?
So one of the things is, as you were telling me about this, I looked up, was this kind of diagram where it basically illustrated that with the brainstem, which you said is the bottom part, and then the diencephalon. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we regulate. That's where, so like go back to the window of tolerance we talked about in our first conversation. Like, man, that's where you have to really regulate yourself. You have to try to understand, even in those moments, to the degree that you even can. I don't even know that you can. But there's regulation that happens there. We relate with our limbic system, and then we reason with our cortex.
Yeah, well said. Yep.
So is that kind of an accurate way of thinking about how we interface with these parts of our brain from an emotional and intellectual standpoint?
Yeah, for sure. And then like learning the implications of what happens when we can't self-regulate is super important, because then like and I would say most of the world we aren't able to self-regulate, and so we're not able to access we're not even able to relate a lot of times, and we're definitely not able to reason like what you're saying. Which is why we tend to stick to tribes. Like we're very like much into people that view life and have grown up with similar circumstances or socioeconomic things, like because the brain feels safe when other people's perceptions are similar to mine. The brain feels a little weirded out when I'm with someone from a different political party or religion or something like that, you know?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. We're always trying to create safety for ourselves. And I don't know about you guys, this would be, and I'm just going to throw some numbers out there, but this would be my perception of it, is I would make up that 80% of the time I'm making decisions from the bottom half of my brain and not the prefrontal cortex on a good day, maybe 90%. And then 10%, 20%, I am accessing my prefrontal cortex. I'm making decisions that way. And truthfully, in today's society, I would want that to be the other way around, because I would think that most of the time we're actually relatively very safe. I did Darren Hardy's, it's called Every Hero's Journey or Hero's Journey a few years ago. And he said it's fascinating because we have such a high rate of depression, right? And mental health issues. And there's a lot of challenges going around the world. But he said in his training that there statistically hasn't been a safer time to be on the planet. So if that's true, that there hasn't been a safer time to be on the planet, then I think it's really important to look at this model, because we actually process the world naturally backwards, because that's the way that it's been, right? but that has some that keeps us alive. It makes great decisions when you're on the freeway. But if I'm living in the 80-20 rule where 80% of my decisions are processed from the wrong part of my brain, and I'm doing that as a coach or as a leader, the chances that I maybe blow up some relationships or hurt some people along the way is much higher, right? Because I'm going to respond from a part that is accessing and is living in more fear and self-preservation than it is seeking to be curious and understanding, right? And if we went all the way to Covey's, hey, how do you be a highly successful person? Well, I got to seek to understand people first, right? So I actually have to access the other part of my brain. Am I thinking about that right, Shane? I mean,
think
what are
so.
you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like listening to you talk when you get passionate like that. I find it attractive.
Nice. I like
I'm
that.
glad that I think you're in your prefrontal cortex right now. Sounds like it. You're able to.
Well, we're
to sit
setting
there.
a tone for our date night.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The attractive date
Like,
night.
but it's true, because if you don't feel safe, then you're gonna try, like, naturally you're gonna make everyone else around you feel unsafe, because that's gonna, like, so. But if I'm able to access, like, filter through these parts of my brain that are telling me that it's not safe, if I understand what you just said, of like, the world actually is a pretty safe place, and then I can self-regulate, and then I can treat people with dignity and respect, and ask curious questions, which basketball coaches don't do very often. Like, it's all fear-based motivation. I'm going to get you to comply with what I need you to do right now, so that so that the scoreboard will confirm,
Yeah.
who I want to be, and it's just toxic.
Which at the end of the day, right? I mean, this is the interesting thing. We perceive a lot of things are scarier than they actually are in reality. Like, the story that my brain says from that part of my brain is, hey, this is really scary, feel fearful, and like death, like a death response. And I know I've had that. Like, I've struggled with anxiety in my past, past and present. I'm not saying I'm over it, but in the past, it's been to the spot where, hey, it controlled me enough to go, I almost feel like I want to die right now. That's the feeling on the inside, that this particular problem in my business is so scary that I don't want to deal with it. Like, but the reality of this situation is, when you actually look at it, and this is why I think this model is so important, is it's not actually that scary. Like, it's my perceived fear of the situation. It's what I'm assessing to it. And let's see if I can land this plane here without getting too far off. And it's really important if we can start to identify which part of the brain that we're using to process, right? Because if I'm stuck in that fear, there's a good chance that I'm not in the logical part of my brain, that I'm not in the part of my brain that's accessing reason and feelings and emotion, right? If I'm stuck there, because most of the time I'm not actually in a life or death situation. In that particular business situation, it would have been like, okay, great. What is the absolute worst thing could happen in this situation? We lose some money. Business goes under, and I'm still alive and okay. You could take it one step further and go, I got to file Chapter 13 bankruptcy. I'm still okay. Like, I'm still okay, but I'm living out of the other part. And then I make decisions that are not great for me and myself and don't actually help me lead anybody. So I know window of tolerance was one way to help us emotionally regulate. Like, how do you, Shane, now start to catch yourself, like, with the data that you've been given, right, and been empowered with? How are you using that in your daily life to make yourself a better leader?
Yeah, I think more recently, like, I don't know how, but I haven't been thinking so, like, finitely. So a lot of growth and a lot of, like, failing, and starting new things. It's kind of allowed me to have more of an infinite, like, growth mindset, which I'm super thankful for. And understanding how the brain sequences and funnels and filters things, has been a game changer for me, like I said. So let me share like a quick story. that I had, like, I really did have a breakthrough in one of these modules in learning, taking this course, certification in neurosequential model in sport, is like understanding that, like, my brain is trying to have, let me say it like this, like, my brain is trying to keep me safe. And so since it's experienced negative emotions before, like, it's at all costs, it's trying to prevent that from happening again. And so I used to operate from a place of, like, I don't want to fight with my spouse or my coworker, because, like, of the damage that it does, right? Or the results of it, or like that, like, do we just have this, like, negative um, connotation of fighting and conflict, and so we're really afraid of it. And so, like, I was in an argument, or I wasn't yet in the argument, but I knew it was about to be, like, some conflict with Coley, my wife. um, and I got this picture of the brain, and so I felt this coming to the surface, and I felt myself wanting to lie and just run away completely. And what I learned and what I understood and had this, like, light bulb aha moment was, like, oh, my brain has experienced fighting with my wife before about this topic, which was like time management or something like that. Um, and my brain didn't like the way it felt in that argument, right? And so it's not necessarily the argument that I'm afraid of, or the conflict. Like, what the peel back the next layer of the onion, it's actually the way that I felt. My brain didn't like the way that it felt in the argument, and so it's going to avoid that at all costs. So if I can, like, understand that, which I'm starting to, I definitely haven't arrived, but if I can understand that my brain is just trying not to feel bad, then I can actually enter into the conversation from, like, a curious place, instead of a fear-based, like, fight, flight, or freeze thing. So did I explain that well?
That's super interesting. You're reminding me of something that we talked about with Josiah Egono, who he wrote a book about performance, and it's kind of this conversation between what is healthy and unhealthy stress, right? Like, how do we differentiate as leaders between a stress that we know is healthy, that we need to lean into, we need to work through, and a stress that is just bad? Like, so for example, let me think of a workplace example, like an employee is stealing from the company and manipulating a situation, gaslighting us maybe, so that they're stealing, so they can basically get away with stealing. Okay, well, we just need to terminate that employee. That's not really something we need to have the conflict, terminate the employee, and be done with it, right? But there would be healthy stress that would be something like, hey, we have a really challenging sales cycle right now, and we're trying to hit a goal that's, a stretch goal that exceeds what we originally set out to achieve. So healthy versus that may be a bad example. In your marriage, you and your wife are dealing with something you've never dealt with before, and so it's a new challenge to go face together, versus, you keep making the same mistake over and over again after you've repeatedly told her you would no longer do it, and now you're lying and being abusive in order to continue to get away with it. Like, healthy versus unhealthy stress.
Yeah.
Like, is that paradigm even helpful?
It is. And so, like, one of the things that I'm excited about in the membership is conversations like this. And like, we're gonna really, really, like, do a deep dive into stress and pressure and our relationship with it in the membership. And because one thing that we know, like, here's a teaser. One thing that we know about stress and pressure is that, like, those two words kind of, like, they live in the same part of the brain. And so, and then what we know is, like, that stress and pressure can actually, like, produce cortisol, which is what I like. We actually need it to compete, like to get to the line in business. Like it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but we're so scared of it because the brain doesn't like the way that we feel when we're stressed. But if we could change our relationship with stress and pressure and almost like welcome it, like we've watched film in basketball terms, we watch film. We know at this point in the game or at this point in the sales meeting, I'm gonna feel nervous. And if I could just almost like thank it, like, hey, here come the nerves. That's because this matters. I'm in the right conversation. I'm in the right game. I'm in the ballpark, right? Then stress is actually an enhancer, and then my performance can go up, right? So that's why like I love watching and studying like peak performers, because when the game's on the line, like if I have a healthy relationship with stress and pressure and I'm not scared of it and I can actually expect it and like know, like if it's capacity building, I've created a capacity, then I talk to it, I put it in its Tupperware, and like, right, I see you, I feel you, I'm putting you here, I've done the work. Now you can go stay over here and let me compete from a place of health. And I think results are kind of come naturally at that point. So
Yeah.
I think for a long time in my life, I competed worse under stress and pressure. And so the implications of this is like, oh, this is a really cool conversation for leaders. Is that, oh, stress can actually be an enhancer and not an inhibitor.
And why do you think that so often when I'm faced with stress, I choose to mismanage it? Like I don't actually, why do I stay stuck in the kind of lower parts of dysregulation, unhealth, making bad decisions because of stress rather than putting it in its container and performing out of a healthy place?
Yeah, what I really want to do is just ask that question exactly how you worded it to you and have you answer it. What?
Yeah, you're a good coach. You're a good coach.
Because that question seems like you're processing something, so I'm curious. Like, yeah, why is that?
Yeah, I think I know why specifically for me, but I don't know, I don't understand the mechanics behind it. I know in a moment of like, let's say, let's go back to the peppermint mocha creamer conversation, right? I think in one of our podcasts, we talked about peppermint mocha creamer and jalapeno kettle chips, right? And I can easily, eat an entire bag of those kettle chips, like in one slice, just sit in front of the TV and just eat the whole bag. I'm not going to say I've done it, but I'm going to say that it could be done.
There's a capacity for it to happen.
Yes. So I do that because ultimately I'm focused on the feeling that I'm getting and the satisfaction that I'm getting from eating the chips. And even though I know in the moment that like what I really, really want is a 6-pack, I don't want it as bad as I want to be able to enjoy the kettle chips now. Like I really just like, as bad as I want that 6-pack, I want the kettle chips just a little bit badder.
Oh, you're talking about like a 6-pack of abs or like a 6-pack of Modelo?
Yeah. No.
Abdominals.
The 6-pack of beer would be the same thing as the 6-pack of chips, right? It would be the thing that feels satisfying there in the moment, but doesn't actually align with my long-term desires.
Yeah.
And I would even say it doesn't align with my values, but it's a place where my discipline has not met, like my personal discipline and patterns of habit have not actually met with my values. Like my values are aspirational and my current state, like I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
So what I guess the way to flip it back to you, Shane, would be to say, what is it mechanically that's going on with me that keeps me so excited in the moment about those kettle chips or about Modelo for you, that you just can't put it down, or you just don't want to, you refuse to stop doing the thing that you know you shouldn't be doing because it feels so good? Like, what's the mechanism?
Yeah, it's for me, like making decisions that I know are away moves, but I do them anyways. Like it's, uh, yeah, it's like those are like my most extremely immature moments. It's the extremely like finite focus, like I just selfish. I'm not accessing um any perspective. I'm only asked, like, it's all perception, right? Like I just want to feel better right now. Like my brain, I'm just giving in. So yeah, and that's really deep. Like that has everything to do with my story and this narrative that's going on internally in my own head of like I'm not actually ever going to make it, and so I don't trust the process anymore. And so I just like, it's so hard. Like sometimes being consistent in these things is so hard that like my brain is just hey, like tapping me on the back, like they're there, Shane. Like
Yeah.
you've worked really hard. Go ahead and take a break, right? Go drink that or eat that or smoke that, or some people it's worked. For Taylor, it might even be trying to get a six-pack in his abs. Could be an away move. Some people get addicted to working out,
Working out.
So
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense based on what you shared, Shane. So what you said is, say the brain is constantly looking to feel good, right?
Yeah.
So I look at Brad's situation and story and my own, right? The brain is constantly looking to feel good. So if I'm going into a stressful situation and it's gone poorly in the past, which almost all of us would have plenty of, um, little traumas along the way that have gone, hey, these conversations don't go well. Probably because two people are entering into that, both accessing the wrong part of their brain, and that can lead to a lot of hurt and pain, right? So the interesting part when we start to talk about it is the brain is constantly looking for pleasure, right? And safety. We are trying to retrain our brain, use its own neuroplasticity, I think is the term, right? To rewire the brain here to go, okay, I've always sought this certain thing. And I'm a recovery guy. I've dealt with addiction in my life. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to admit, right? We have to admit that this problem is here, but to own that it exists. And the problem is, hey, when I enter into a hard situation, I go to a fight or flight, or I keep choosing the kettle chips in this example or the beer, rather than the hard thing that I want to choose, which is in the moment of pressure, what am I going to do? Right? But the only way to is through, and we have to start having some new experiences to help rewrite the brain. So the story that I make up for leaders is one of the most powerful things that they can do is first admit that this scenario is true, that this idea is true, that the neurosequential model exists, that most of our decisions are made from the wrong part of our brain. If we can admit that, now we can start to go, okay, what's the heavy lifting? What's the work? What and that's where you can all of a sudden go, hey, okay, cool. If I press in and I don't need to get rid of stress, I don't need to get rid of pressure, but I can embrace it. Any of you guys do any kind of meditation stuff? Either of you two? No? I do a lot of headspace. I don't do a lot. I try to. But the whole point is not to get rid of emotion that we don't want to feel. It's to understand and sit with the emotion that we don't want to feel, and to befriend the emotion that we don't want to feel. Because the harder I try to get rid of, and Brad, this may go back to your point, if I keep making the same stressful conversations and I keep avoiding, or I keep having them in a poor way, it's probably because you're trying too hard to get rid of the stress. Because then you're only going to enter into conversations that are not stressful. If you can start to embrace that, like, okay, this is an opportunity to grow in this area, the story that I would make up is like, all of a sudden we can engage in that if we're not trying to push it away, right? The harder I resist, the more it persists. Does that make sense? Am I preaching too much on the wrong side of the tracks there? I don't know if
No,
that's a phrase.
no, not at all. You're making me think a lot, and I think that what makes great leaders so good at this is that they know how to move themselves up the brain, if that makes sense. They know how to move themselves from that, regulate, relate, reason, and they get very skilled at that process. And then they get skilled not only at it for themselves, but they get skilled at helping other people move from regulate, relate to reason, right? Up that funnel, up that triangle.
Yeah, and I love that. That was super well said, Brad. And don't you think that sometimes we can't do that on our own? Like we need a
100%.
like, yeah. So
I totally agree. And I think that's the utility of a good parent in the life of a kid, as the child is experiencing, my sibling hit me, took something from me, yelled at me, was mean to me, bully at school, whatever. A good parent has the capacity to help their child, regulate,
yep.
relate to how they feel, relate to the situation and to the world around them, and then reason out, okay, well, let's prospect into the future and think about what we do when this happens next time.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Where my leadership, I think, needs to grow is it's not that I never get to the reasoning. I can get there, right? And I do well there. But it's the speed probably and the clarity of moving from I'm engaging in this fight or flight space to, okay, now I recognize what's happening and I'm advancing myself out of it.
Yeah.
That's where I personally struggle. I think there are probably plenty of people who struggle in other areas along that process. But sometimes I think I get way into fight or flight and it's like too late. It's like I've already reacted and done dumb things or said dumb things. And then I'm like, oh, whoops. Right? I didn't notice early enough, quickly enough to really affect a situation or a relationship in a way that was ideal.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I think, Shane, the genius part of kind of what you're doing too is that will be done so much better with a tribe to help you figure that out.
Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You can only do so much reading on your own.
You can go. Yeah, that's right, Taylor. You can only do so much reading on your own, but when there's a place that you can go and you can share what I just shared with a community of people who are like, oh, that happened to me today too, with, with one of my players or one of my fellow coaches or an administrator or whatever, that's a pretty powerful place to be in.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Shane.
Okay. Where do we go next? Where do we go from here? How do they find you?
Come to your house.
Yeah, my home address. I have a free guide. That's the 3 R's to, like, if you were to focus on these 3 words as a leader, then you'll step into health in your own life and everyone around you will become healthier as a result. So I'll give you a tease there. Rapport, like we have to get really good at building connections and trust. And so rapport, and then resiliency, like what we want on our teams and in my own life is resiliency and consistency and like choosing bravery, even when it's really hard. And then number 3, which is my favorite one to talk about, is the hardest is repair. Like we have to get really good at repair because we're gonna hurt people, and people are gonna hurt us. And so if we get really good at repairing relational and organizational damage to being even stronger than before it was torn, you're going to have a really healthy climate, and organically your results are going to start to come. So rapport, resiliency, and repair. And so you can get that on my website now. You can get that free guide. And you can sign up for my email list on the website. And then I would love for you to click the tab on the website and learn more about the actual membership. And it's super affordable. This first week when it launches, we're giving everybody like a super affordable rate that will go up, and it's super low time commitment. We're shooting for trying to get everyone in the membership to commit to spending 20 to 30 minutes a week to learn and grow together. So now, should I say what the website is called? The Healthy.
Yes. Or the first rule of the website is there is no website.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
Fight Club moment.
It's the name of my business is The Healthy Competitor, and then you just go .com, thehealthycompetitor.com, and you can learn about the membership on there and more about what I'm doing. So I would love to grow and learn with you, one mindset shift at a time.
Love it.
Thank you.
Can we put is there like show? Can we write that?
Yeah,
that
it'll
in
be
there?
in the show notes.
Yeah. Show
Oh,
notes.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep, all that'll be in the show notes. Website will be in the show notes. Your home address will be in the show notes. Social security number will be in the show notes. All the above.
Maybe we should also just put in the show notes like which day and time in theater we're gonna go see Inside Out 2.
If people can just join us.
If you're a fan
Yeah,
of the
we're
Daily
here.
Leader, Taylor and Brad, you can actually meet them at Harkins Theater Friday night.
That's right.
Like, yeah.
That'd be amazing.
I love that.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, I'm grateful and thankful
Shane,
for
as
you guys.
always. Yeah, man. Yeah, same. Thanks for coming on. Daily Leader people, like, subscribe, do all those good things, and we'll be back next week.
All right.